My best friend told the hairdresser to chop my hair the week before my wedding. I'd grown it out for 3 years specifically for the wedding. Rachel knew this. She'd been there through every trim, every deep conditioning treatment, every moment I said no to a fun new cut because I wanted that long romantic updo for my wedding day. She was supposed to protect me at the salon. That's why she came along. Instead, when I closed my eyes for the wash, she slipped the stylist $300 cash and whispered new instructions. Cut it short. Pixie short. Say it was a miscommunication. The stylist took the money. When I opened my eyes, 2 feet of hair covered the floor and Rachel was fake gasping, hand over her mouth, playing shocked. The stylist kept apologizing, saying she thought I said I wanted a dramatic change, that I was tired of the length. I sobbed for 2 hours. Rachel held me, rubbed my back, said maybe it was meant to be, that I'd look edgy and modern now. She offered to pay for extensions, but we both knew they'd never look right with only 6 days to blend them properly. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel's reaction. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. The stylist had cut with such confidence, no hesitation, no checking in like they usually do with big changes. I called the salon the next morning, asked to speak to the manager. Told her I suspected something happened but needed to know for sure. She reviewed the security footage, called me back within an hour. Your friend handed our stylist money while you were at the wash station. We have it on camera. The audio is muffled, but you can see the cash exchange clearly. She offered to fire the stylist, offered free services for a year. I said no, just emailed me the footage. I watched it 20 times. Rachel's smug little smile as she handed over the bills. The stylist nodding eagerly. Rachel checking to make sure I still had my eyes closed. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I called James, told him everything. He was furious, but I asked him to wait. Let me handle this my way. 4 days before the wedding, Rachel threw my bachelorette party. 15 women at a wine bar she'd booked. During her toast, she went on about our 12-year friendship, how she'd always been there for me, how she was so happy I found James even though it meant less time for our friendship. But true friends adapt, she said, raising her glass. That's when I stood up. Speaking of adapting, I said, I have something to share. I pulled out my phone, connected it to the bar's TV system that the manager had graciously let me access an hour earlier. Before we toast to friendship, I thought everyone should see this. The security footage played on the giant screen. Rachel's hand extending cash. The stylist nodding. Rachel checking that I wasn't watching. The whole bar went silent. $300, I said to the room. That's what Rachel paid to have my hair chopped off before my wedding. The salon manager confirmed it. The stylist confessed when confronted with the footage. Rachel's face went from confused to panicked to furious in seconds. That's not... You're misunderstanding what you're seeing, she started. The stylist admitted everything, Rachel. She still had the exact bills in her wallet. $300 bills. The other women started murmuring. My cousin Amy stood up. You sabotaged her hair on purpose? Before her wedding? Rachel tried to defend herself. It wasn't sabotage. I thought she'd look better with short hair. More sophisticated. That long hair was aging her. I was doing her a favor. My sister laughed. Not a nice laugh. You paid someone behind her back to do something you knew she didn't want and you think that's a favor? Rachel turned to me. You're being so dramatic about this. It's just hair. It grows back. You're right, I said. It does grow back. But trust doesn't, and neither does friendship after someone shows you who they really are. The room was staring at Rachel now. She tried one more defense. I've been your best friend for 12 years. I've always looked out for you. No, I said. You've been threatened by me for 12 years. Every time something good happened in my life, you found a way to taint it. But you smiled through it all, hugged me through the pain you caused, made me think you were my safety net when really you were the one pushing me off the cliff. I turned back to the group. Rachel's not invited to my wedding anymore. She's not my maid of honor. She's not my friend. And I wanted all of you to know exactly why, so she can't spin this story later. Rachel grabbed her purse and ran out. Half the women followed her to the parking lot, not to comfort her, but to make sure she left. My sister took over the party, ordered champagne, made a new toast about real friendship and karma. The wedding was flawless, until the reception, when James's best man pulled me aside with a confession. Rachel had contacted him weeks before, begging him to convince James to call off the wedding. My hand shot out and grabbed James's arm, fingers digging into his suit jacket because my legs felt weird and shaky. The DJ was playing some upbeat song and people were laughing at tables around us, but all I could hear was the best man's words echoing in my head. James turned to look at me and his whole face changed, went from concern to something darker, angrier. He looked back at the best man and his voice came out low and tight when he spoke. Tell me everything. The best man glanced around like he was checking if anyone could hear us, then pulled us further away from the dance floor into a corner near the bar. He said Rachel called him about 3 weeks ago, late at night, crying so hard he could barely understand her at first. She kept saying James was making a huge mistake, that I was controlling and manipulative, that I had him fooled, but she could see through me. The best man said she begged him to talk James out of the wedding, said it was his duty as a best friend to save James from ruining his life. I felt this weird calm wash over me, which was strange because I should have been freaking out. But it made sense now, all of it. The hair wasn't just some jealous impulse. Rachel had been planning to destroy my wedding for weeks, maybe longer. She wanted to stop it from happening at all, and when that didn't work, she went after my appearance instead. James wasn't calm, though. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping, and his hands were in fists at his sides. Why didn't you tell me? The best man looked uncomfortable, shifted his weight from foot to foot. I did tell someone. I told your parents. We all agreed not to say anything before the wedding because we didn't want to add more stress, and honestly, we thought Rachel was just having some kind of breakdown about losing her best friend. We didn't think she'd actually do anything. James made this sound. Not quite a laugh. More like a bitter exhale. She paid someone to cut off my wife's hair a week before our wedding. I'd say she did something. I touched James's arm again. Gentler this time. Did she say anything else? The best man hesitated, and I knew there was more. Just tell us. He rubbed the back of his neck, looked at the floor. She also said you were cheating on James with someone from your office. She gave me a name and everything. Some guy in your department. Said she had proof, but she was trying to protect James from finding out the hard way. I actually felt myself smile, which probably looked crazy given the situation. That's my gay coworker Walton, who's been with his husband for 6 years. Rachel met him at the company holiday party. The best man nodded like that tracked with what he expected. I figured it was garbage, which is why I didn't take it seriously. But she was really committed to the story. Sent me screenshots of you and this guy having lunch together like that proved something. I needed to tell James's parents about this. And my family. They needed to know how deep Rachel's planning went. How calculated all of this was. I scanned the reception hall and spotted James's mom talking with my parents near one of the centerpiece displays. Come on. We headed over and I tried to keep my face normal because I didn't want to alarm all the guests. When we reached them, James's mom took one look at our faces and her smile dropped. What's wrong? James said we needed to talk privately, and his dad immediately started looking around for a quiet spot. We ended up in this little alcove near the coat check. The 6 of us crowded together while the party continued without us. James's mom kept apologizing before we even explained everything. I'm so sorry, I know we should have told you. We just thought it was wedding jitters or jealousy, and we didn't want to add to your stress. My mom looked confused, glancing between all of us. What are we talking about? The best man filled everyone in, explained about Rachel's phone call 3 weeks ago, the accusations she made, the story about me cheating. My dad's face went red, the way it does when he's really angry but trying to stay controlled. My sister showed up halfway through, must have noticed us all huddled together and got curious. When she heard what Rachel had tried to do, she didn't look surprised at all. We need to document all of this. Everyone looked at her. I'm serious. The hair thing, the bachelorette party, now this. Rachel's going to try to spin some story, play the victim, maybe even spread more lies about you. We need everything written down with dates and details. James was already pulling out his phone. She's right. He started typing, fingers moving fast across the screen. Mom, when exactly did the best man tell you about Rachel's call? His mother thought for a second. It was a Tuesday, about 2.5 weeks ago. He came over for dinner and mentioned it then. James typed that in. And she called him the night before? The best man confirmed. Sunday night, around 11. My sister leaned over to watch James's notes. Include the stylist's confession too and the security footage. The fact that Rachel paid $300 in cash. I pulled out my own phone, opened my email, found the video file the salon manager had sent me. I'm forwarding this to you right now. James's phone buzzed as the email came through. My mom was watching all of this with her hand pressed to her mouth, shaking her head slowly. I can't believe someone could be that vindictive. For 12 years I thought she was my friend. My dad put his arm around my shoulders. She was never your friend, honey. Friends don't do this. I felt this surge of something, not quite anger, more like determination mixed with defiance. I looked at James and his family, at my parents and sister, all of them standing there ready to back me up and protect me from whatever Rachel tried next. I'm not letting her ruin one more second of my wedding day. James looked up from his phone. What do you want to do? I want to dance with my husband. I grabbed his hand and started pulling him back toward the reception hall. Our families followed, and I could hear my sister already talking about making sure everyone knew the real story. The DJ was playing some pop song, and our guests were scattered around, some dancing, some at tables talking and drinking. I walked straight up to the DJ booth, James still holding my hand. Can you play our song next? The one we picked for our first dance? The DJ checked his list and nodded. You got it. The current song ended, and then our song started. The one we'd spent hours debating before finally agreeing on. James pulled me onto the dance floor, and suddenly people were cheering, clapping, forming a circle around us. I wrapped my arms around his neck, and he held my waist, and we swayed together while everyone watched. My short hair felt light and strange, but I didn't care anymore. Rachel had tried so hard to ruin this, had planned and schemed and paid money and spread lies, and here I was anyway. Married to James, surrounded by people who actually cared about me. The song played, and I felt James's breath against my ear when he whispered that he loved me. I said it back and meant it more than I ever had. When the song ended, everyone clapped again, and other couples joined us on the floor. My sister appeared with fresh champagne for me and James, her eyes a little watery but smiling. To real friendship and karma. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt this weird sense of victory. Not because I'd beaten Rachel at something, but because I'd chosen to be happy despite what she tried to take from me. The reception went late, past midnight, and by the time we got to our hotel room, I was exhausted in the best way. My feet hurt from dancing in heels for hours, and my face was sore from smiling, but I felt good. James closed the door behind us, and we both just stood there for a second, the silence sudden after all the noise and music. He loosened his tie, pulled it off completely, and sat down on the edge of the bed. I kicked off my shoes and joined him, our shoulders touching. That was a lot. I laughed because that felt like the understatement of the year. James turned to look at me, and his expression was serious, guilty almost. I should have seen it. Rachel's jealousy. I should have noticed something was off. I took his hand, laced our fingers together. She fooled me for 12 years. You knew her for what? 3 years? And only through me. You can't blame yourself for not seeing something I missed for over a decade. But the phone call to the best man, the lies about you cheating, that was weeks ago. I could have protected you better. I squeezed his hand harder. You did protect me. You trusted me when I said I needed to handle the hair thing my way. You stood by me at the bachelorette party even though you weren't there. You're standing by me now. That's what matters. He pulled me closer, kissed the top of my head where my hair used to be long. I just hate that she hurt you. I know. But she failed. Look at us. We're married. We had an amazing wedding. She tried to destroy this, and she couldn't. We sat there for a while, not talking, just being together. Eventually, we changed into comfortable clothes and got into bed, both of us too wired to sleep right away. James pulled up the notes on his phone, showed me everything he'd documented. The timeline was clear, damning. Rachel's campaign against my wedding had been methodical and planned. Tomorrow we fly to Hawaii, and I'm not thinking about her anymore. James locked his phone, set it on the nightstand. Deal. We're leaving all of this behind for 2 weeks. I curled up against him and closed my eyes. But my brain wouldn't shut off. I kept seeing Rachel's face at the bachelorette party. The panic and rage when she realized I'd exposed her. I wondered if she felt any regret at all, or if she was just angry she got caught. My phone buzzed on the nightstand next morning while I was packing the last few things for our honeymoon. I almost ignored it. Figured it was just more congratulations messages from wedding guests. But something made me check. Text from a number I didn't have saved. Hey, this is Lorelai Watkins. We met at your bachelorette party. I need to talk to you about Rachel before you leave for your honeymoon. It's important. I remembered Lorelai. She was friends with my cousin, had been sitting near the front when I played the security footage. I texted back asking what was up, and she responded immediately. Can we meet for coffee? I know you're probably busy, but I just remembered something from a few months ago, and I think you should know. James came out of the bathroom with his toiletry bag. Who's texting? Someone from the bachelorette party. Lorelai. She says she remembered something about Rachel. James checked his watch. Our flight's not until 2. We could meet her quick if you want. I called Lorelai, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the airport in 40 minutes. James and I loaded our suitcases into the car and headed that direction, stopping at the little cafe with the good espresso that I liked. Lorelai was already there, sitting at a corner table with a mug in front of her. She stood up when she saw us, gave me an awkward hug. Thanks for meeting me. I know your timing is crazy right now. We sat down, and James went to order us drinks while Lorelai fidgeted with her napkin. I've been thinking about what happened at your bachelorette party, about what Rachel did, and it made me remember something from this spring. There was a party at your cousin's place back in April, I think. You and James were there. Lorelai paused while James came back with our coffees, waited until he sat down. Rachel cornered me at that party. Asked me all these questions about you and James. How long you'd been together. Whether you seemed really happy. If James seemed committed. I thought she was just being a good friend, looking out for you. But the questions were weird, really specific. She wanted to know if you ever complained about James, if you'd mentioned any problems in the relationship. I felt cold despite the warm coffee shop. What did you tell her? Lorelai looked embarrassed. I said you seemed really happy, that you talked about James all the time in a good way, that you were excited about the wedding. She kept pushing, though, like she wanted me to say something negative. Asked if I thought James was good enough for you, if your family liked him, whether anyone had concerns about the marriage. I told her everyone was thrilled, and she got this look on her face, kind of pinched and unhappy. Then she changed the subject really fast. James was leaning forward now, focused. Did she ask about anyone else that night? About other people in our friend group? Lorelai nodded slowly. Yeah, actually. She asked about your coworkers, too. Wanted to know if you were close with anyone at your office. I mentioned a few names, and she latched onto one guy's name, asked a bunch of questions about him. That must have been Walton, my gay coworker that Rachel tried to claim I was cheating with. Lorelai's eyes went wide. Oh my God. She was gathering information to use against you. Even back then. The timeline was getting clearer. Rachel had been planning this for months, not weeks. Collecting details, looking for weaknesses, building her case against my relationship. Lorelai wrapped both hands around her mug. There's something else. Later that night, you and James were dancing, and Rachel was watching you from across the room. I was standing near her, and I heard her say something under her breath. She said some people don't deserve the happiness they get. I thought it was a weird comment, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Now, though, knowing everything else, it sounds different. James reached across the table and took my hand. She's been working against you for months. Maybe longer. How far back does this go? I thought about the past year, the past 2 years. Rachel's comments that seemed supportive on the surface but left me feeling vaguely bad. Her suggestions that were framed as help, but somehow made things harder. The way she always had an opinion about my choices, always positioned herself as the voice of reason, while subtly undermining my confidence. I don't know. Maybe years. Maybe the whole 12 years of our friendship. Lorelai looked genuinely distressed. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I should have said something when she was asking all those questions. You couldn't have known. I didn't know, and I was her supposed best friend. Thank you for telling me this now. James checked his watch again. We should probably head to the airport soon. I thanked Lorelai again, promised to keep in touch, and we headed back to the car. As James drove toward the airport, I stared out the window and tried to process everything. Rachel hadn't just sabotaged my hair on impulse. She'd been building toward something for months, collecting information, looking for ways to hurt me or break up my relationship. The hair thing was probably plan B after her attempt to turn the best man against James failed. And who knows what else she tried that I don't know about yet. James reached over and squeezed my knee. You okay? I'm okay. Just realizing how deep this goes. How long she's been doing this. We're going to Hawaii. We're going to have an amazing honeymoon. And when we get back, we'll deal with whatever else comes up. But right now, I'm choosing to focus on us. James smiled and I felt myself relax slightly. He was right. Rachel had taken enough of my energy, my happiness, my peace of mind. I wasn't giving her my honeymoon too. We landed in Maui 6 hours later and checked into a resort right on the beach. James carried me over the threshold of our room and we both laughed because it felt cheesy but also kind of perfect. The next 3 days blurred together in the best way possible. We woke up early to watch the sunrise from our balcony, spent hours floating in the ocean, and tried snorkeling for the first time at Molokini Crater. James kept pointing at fish and making exaggerated, excited faces through his mask, which made me laugh so hard I swallowed seawater. We talked about everything except Rachel. About buying a house together. About maybe getting a dog. About whether we wanted kids, and if so, how many. Normal newlywed stuff that felt amazing after weeks of drama and stress. And I could feel the tension leaving my shoulders bit by bit. My short hair dried quickly after swimming, and I stopped looking in mirrors and wincing at the length. James kept telling me I looked beautiful, and I was starting to believe him. On the 4th morning, I woke up before James and grabbed my phone to check the weather. A Facebook notification sat at the top of my screen. Message from Sabina Thornton. My stomach dropped a little. Sabina was in our friend group, but we weren't super close. We saw each other at parties and group dinners, but didn't hang out one-on-one. I opened the message. It started with an apology for interrupting my honeymoon and congratulations on the wedding. Then she said she needed to tell me something about Rachel that had been weighing on her mind since she heard what happened at the bachelorette party. I sat up straighter in bed, careful not to wake James. Sabina wrote that 5 years ago, when she got engaged before I did, Rachel started acting weird around her, making little comments about Sabina's fiancé that seemed like concern but felt off. Then rumors started spreading through their friend group that Sabina's fiancé was only marrying her for her family's money. Sabina's parents owned a successful business, and yeah, she came from money. But her fiancé had his own career and had never shown any interest in her family's wealth. The rumors caused huge problems in their relationship. Her fiancé felt insulted and hurt that people thought he was a gold digger. They almost called off the wedding because of it. They went to couples therapy and worked through it and got married anyway, but those months were awful. Sabina said she never knew for sure who started the rumor. People pointed fingers at different sources and it was impossible to track down the original person. But hearing about what Rachel did to me made everything click into place. She scrolled through old text messages and found a bunch from Rachel during that time period. She sent me screenshots. I enlarged them on my phone screen and read through them carefully. The messages were subtle, but once you knew what to look for, the pattern was obvious. Rachel asking questions about the fiancé's job and income. Rachel mentioning an article she read about men who marry for money. Rachel suggesting that moving too fast into marriage was risky. Rachel saying she just wanted Sabina to be sure about her decision. Every message was framed as caring and concerned, but together they painted a picture of someone planting seeds of doubt. I felt sick reading them. This was exactly what Rachel had done to me, just a different method. With me, it was physical sabotage of my hair and trying to turn James's best man against him. With Sabina, it was spreading rumors and subtle manipulation disguised as friendship. I typed back a response thanking Sabina for telling me and promising we'd talk more when I got back from the honeymoon. But inside my head was spinning. Rachel had been doing this for years. To multiple people. I wasn't special or targeted specifically. I was just her most recent victim in a long pattern of jealous sabotage. James stirred next to me and opened his eyes. He saw my face and immediately sat up. I handed him my phone without saying anything. He read through Sabina's message and the screenshots, his expression getting darker with each swipe. When he finished, he set the phone down and pulled me against his chest. We sat like that for a while, him rubbing my back, me trying to process this new information. That evening, we ordered room service and ate on our balcony while the sun set over the ocean. James brought up the Sabina situation, and we talked through it. How could someone pretend to be a friend for so long while actively working to hurt the people around them? How Rachel must have some deep issues with jealousy or insecurity to behave this way repeatedly. James suggested that maybe Rachel's unhappiness with her own life made her want to tear down anyone else's happiness. I agreed that was probably part of it, but it didn't excuse anything. Plenty of unhappy people don't sabotage their friends. The rest of the honeymoon was still good, but Sabina's message had shifted something. I couldn't fully relax anymore because I kept thinking about Rachel's pattern of behavior and wondering how many other people she'd hurt over the years. We came home 2 weeks after the wedding. I felt tanned and rested, but also ready to get back to normal life. James grabbed our luggage from the car while I checked the mailbox. It was stuffed full. Wedding cards with checks inside from relatives who couldn't make it. A package from my aunt. Bills and junk mail. And at the very bottom, a plain white envelope with my name and address written in Rachel's handwriting. No return address. My hands started shaking as I pulled it out. James saw my face when I walked into the house and took the other mail from me so I could focus on the letter. I sat down on the couch and carefully opened the envelope. 6 pages. The letter was 6 pages long, front and back, covered in Rachel's neat handwriting. I started reading. The first paragraph was an apology. She was sorry for hurting me. Sorry for cutting my hair. Sorry for trying to stop the wedding. She missed our friendship and wanted to explain herself. Then it shifted. She said she cut my hair because she genuinely thought I would look better with a shorter style. That long hair was aging me and making me look tired. She thought she was doing me a favor by forcing a change I was too scared to make myself. She tried to stop the wedding because she was worried James wasn't right for me. She'd noticed things about him that concerned her, and she felt it was her duty as my best friend to speak up, even if it meant going behind my back. Everything she did came from a place of love and concern for my well-being. I felt anger building as I read. The letter never once acknowledged the actual harm she caused. Never admitted that paying someone to cut my hair without my permission was a violation. Never took responsibility for trying to sabotage my relationship based on her own jealousy. Instead, the last 2 pages positioned Rachel as the victim. She wrote about how I humiliated her at the bachelorette party in front of all our friends. How I turned everyone against her when she was only trying to help me. How she'd lost friendships and her reputation because I chose to make a private matter public. She ended by saying she hoped I'd realize someday that real friends tell you hard truths even when it hurts, and that she'd always care about me even if I couldn't see that now. I finished reading and just sat there holding the pages. James came over and I handed him the letter without speaking. He read it quickly, his jaw getting tighter with each page. When he finished, he called my sister and asked her to come over. She arrived 20 minutes later and read the letter while James made coffee. My sister set the pages down on the coffee table and looked at me with this expression of complete disbelief mixed with anger. She said Rachel was trying to rewrite history and make me doubt my own memory of what happened. That the letter was classic manipulation, making herself the victim and positioning her sabotage as acts of love. She pointed out that Rachel never actually apologized for the harm she caused, only for how I reacted to it. That everything in the letter was designed to make me feel guilty for exposing her and to make me question whether I'd been too harsh. James agreed completely. He said Rachel was trying to gaslight me into thinking her version of events was the truth. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. My sister looked at me and asked what I planned to do. I told her I wasn't responding because that's exactly what Rachel wanted. Some kind of engagement that would let her keep the drama going. Instead, I walked to my desk and pulled out a file folder I'd started after the bachelorette party. Inside were printed copies of the salon security footage, screenshots of text messages, and now Rachel's 6-page letter. Documentation in case I needed it later. James asked if I was blocking her number and I realized I should have done that weeks ago. I pulled out my phone right there and blocked Rachel's cell, her email, and every social media account I could think of. My sister did the same thing on her phone. The next 2 days were quiet, and I started to think maybe Rachel had finally gotten the message. Then Cooper called on a Wednesday afternoon while I was making dinner. He sounded uncomfortable and said he needed to tell me something. Rachel had shown up at his house that morning asking for my new address. She told him she needed to apologize in person, and that I wasn't answering her calls. Cooper said he refused and told her to leave me alone, that showing up at people's houses asking for information was creepy behavior. She got angry and said everyone was turning against her unfairly. He asked her to leave his property, and she finally did. But he wanted to warn me that she was actively hunting for ways to contact me. I thanked him and told James as soon as I hung up. He got this worried look on his face and suggested maybe we needed to think about legal protection. The next day, I called a friend from college who became a lawyer. I explained the whole situation without naming Rachel at first, just laying out the facts. The hair sabotage, the attempt to stop the wedding, the manipulative letter, and now showing up at Cooper's house asking for my address. My lawyer friend listened carefully and then asked if Rachel had made any direct threats. I said no, nothing like that. She explained that without threats of violence or a clear pattern of stalking behavior, I probably couldn't get a restraining order yet. but she strongly advised me to document every single attempt Rachel made to contact me or show up in my life. Save every text, every email, every voicemail. Write down dates and times when she contacted mutual friends asking about me. Build a paper trail in case her behavior escalated to the point where legal action became necessary. I felt both relieved and worried. Relieved that I had a plan. Worried that Rachel might actually escalate enough to need that plan. Over the next few weeks, something strange started happening. Friends from our social circle began reaching out to me privately, wanting to talk. The first was a woman named Michelle, who I'd known for about 5 years. She asked if we could meet for coffee, and when we sat down, she looked nervous. She said hearing about what Rachel did to me had triggered memories of her own experience 3 years ago. Michelle had gotten a big promotion at work, and Rachel was the first person she told. 2 weeks later, Michelle's boss called her in and said there were concerns about her qualifications for the position. Someone had sent an anonymous email to HR claiming Michelle had lied on her resume. The claims were investigated and proven false, but the whole process was humiliating and stressful. Michelle never knew who sent that email, but looking back now, only Rachel knew about the promotion before the email arrived. Then a guy named Ricky contacted me through Facebook Messenger. He said when he started dating his now wife 4 years ago, Rachel befriended her and started planting seeds of doubt. Little comments about how Ricky seemed controlling, how he was moving the relationship too fast, how his ex-girlfriend had complained about his jealousy. None of it was true, but it caused fights between Ricky and his girlfriend for months. They almost broke up over it. Rachel positioned herself as the concerned friend the whole time, offering support while actively undermining their relationship. The third person was someone I barely knew, a friend of a friend named Lisa. She reached out to say that 8 years ago, Rachel had volunteered to help with Lisa's wedding planning. Rachel offered to contact vendors and get quotes. Several vendors later told Lisa they never received her follow-up calls after initial consultations, which cost Lisa her first choice venue and photographer. Rachel claimed she'd called everyone, but the vendors must have been disorganized. Lisa believed her at the time. Each story followed the same pattern. Rachel positioned herself as the helpful friend, the first to know about good news, the one offering support. Then she'd sabotage behind the scenes while maintaining her caring friend image. She'd be there to comfort people through problems she'd secretly caused. I sat at my kitchen table after Lisa's call and just stared at the wall. James asked if I was okay, and I told him I was seeing the full picture now. Rachel hadn't just betrayed me. She'd spent 12 years strategically placing herself at the center of my life, so she'd always know what was happening first. Every time I shared good news with her before anyone else, I was giving her time to plan her sabotage. When I got into grad school, she was the first person I called. 2 weeks later, someone sent the admissions office an anonymous tip that I'd plagiarized my application essay. It was investigated and cleared, but the stress nearly made me defer enrollment. When I got my first real job after college, Rachel threw me a celebration dinner. A month later, my boss received an anonymous complaint that I was bad-mouthing the company on social media. It wasn't true, but I had to defend myself in meetings. I'd always thought I was just unlucky, that bad things happened randomly. But they weren't random. They were Rachel, every single time, destroying my happiness while pretending to care. James suggested we get out of the house and do something normal. Our friends Walton and Jennifer were hosting a dinner party that Saturday, and we'd already said yes before all the Rachel stuff intensified. I wasn't sure I wanted to go, but James thought it might help to see people and remember we had real friends who actually supported us. We showed up at Walton and Jennifer's place, and the tension was immediate. Half the guests were people who'd been at the bachelorette party and witnessed me expose Rachel. The other half were friends who knew about the situation but hadn't seen it firsthand. Walton and Jennifer greeted us warmly and congratulated us on the wedding. A few other people came over to hug me and say supportive things, but I noticed a group in the corner who kept glancing at me and then looking away quickly when I made eye contact. One woman named Stephanie, who I knew was still friends with Rachel, barely acknowledged me when we arrived. During dinner, people tried to keep conversation light. We talked about work, upcoming vacations, a new restaurant downtown, but Rachel's name hung in the air like smoke, present even when unspoken. After dinner, we moved to the living room for drinks. That's when Stephanie made her move. She was talking to another guest about some mutual friends' drama when she suddenly got louder, clearly wanting me to hear. She said something about how some people handle conflicts privately with dignity and others feel the need to air dirty laundry in public for attention. The room got quiet. I could feel people looking at me, waiting to see if I'd react. I took a sip of my wine and then spoke calmly. I said Rachel's actions were public when she sabotaged my appearance before my wedding in a salon with witnesses and security cameras. When she contacted my fiancé's best man trying to stop my wedding. When she paid money to have my hair cut against my will. I simply matched her energy by making sure people knew the truth about what she'd done, so she couldn't spin her own version later. Stephanie's face went red. She started to say something about forgiveness and moving on, but I interrupted her. I asked if she'd forgive someone who paid $300 to sabotage her wedding appearance. If she'd move on from someone who tried to destroy her relationship behind her back. Stephanie didn't answer. She grabbed her purse and left shortly after. James and I left the party around 11 and sat in the car for a few minutes before driving home. He said he was proud of how I handled Stephanie, but he could tell the evening had been hard. I admitted that seeing our friend group split into camps was painful. Some people clearly understood why I'd exposed Rachel publicly. Others thought I should have handled it privately. Like betrayal is something you're supposed to keep quiet to protect the person who betrayed you. James said we might lose some friendships over this, and asked how I felt about that. I thought about it for a minute while he started the car. Then I told him I was okay with it. Anyone who couldn't see the severity of what Rachel did, anyone who thought my public exposure was worse than her deliberate sabotage, wasn't someone I wanted in my life anyway. We were going to have a smaller social circle, but it would be filled with people who actually had our backs. James reached over and squeezed my hand. He said that sounded like a good plan to him. Monday morning, I went back to work after taking time off for the wedding and honeymoon. Walking into my office building felt surprisingly normal and good. My coworkers welcomed me back and asked about the wedding. Several people commented on my hair, saying the short style looked modern and professional. I thanked them without explaining the traumatic story behind it. Sitting at my desk and diving into emails and projects was therapeutic in a way I didn't expect. For 8 hours a day, I could focus on normal tasks instead of constantly thinking about Rachel's betrayal. Work gave me structure and purpose that had nothing to do with the drama of the past month. My boss asked me to lead a new project, and I threw myself into it, grateful for the distraction and the challenge. At lunch on my third day back, I went to the cafeteria and noticed a woman sitting alone who I didn't recognize. She had dark curly hair and was reading a book while eating a sandwich. I grabbed my food and on impulse asked if I could join her. She looked up and smiled, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. She introduced herself as Clementine Pike and said she'd just started 2 weeks ago in the marketing department. We talked about her transition to the company, what brought her to the city, her favorite coffee shops in the area. The conversation flowed easily and naturally. She was funny and smart and had no connection whatsoever to Rachel or any of the drama. When lunch ended, Clementine suggested we do this again tomorrow, and I agreed immediately. Walking back to my desk, I felt something shift inside me. Making a new friend who knew nothing about my past, who I could build a relationship with from scratch based on who I actually was now, felt like the first genuinely good thing to happen in weeks. Clementine and I met for lunch the next day, and the day after that. By the end of the week, it became our routine. She always had funny stories about her last job or observations about our company that made me laugh. I found myself looking forward to noon every day, checking the clock at 11:30, grabbing my wallet early. The conversation stayed light at first. We talked about movies and restaurants and the weird guy in accounting who microwaved fish every single day. I didn't mention James or the wedding or anything personal. Clementine never pushed. She just showed up every day with that easy smile and made lunch feel like a break from everything heavy in my life. 3 weeks into our lunch routine, Clementine ordered her usual sandwich and then looked at me across the table. She said she'd noticed I never talked about my personal life, and that was totally fine. But she wanted me to know she was a safe person if I ever needed to talk. Something about the way she said it, no pressure, just an offer, made my throat tight. I put down my fork and told her I'd just gotten married a month ago. She congratulated me, asked to see pictures. I showed her a few on my phone, careful to avoid any that showed my hair clearly. But Clementine noticed anyway. She asked if I'd cut my hair recently because it looked really short in the wedding photos. I took a breath and told her the whole story. The salon, the cash, Rachel's betrayal, the bachelorette party exposure, everything. Clementine listened without interrupting, her face showing genuine shock and anger on my behalf. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said her college roommate had done something similar, not with hair, but with spreading lies about Clementine to their whole friend group because she was jealous of Clementine's relationship. She'd had to cut that friend off completely and rebuild her social circle from scratch. It was the first time someone had shared a similar experience instead of just saying they were sorry or that they couldn't imagine. We sat there for another 20 minutes past when we should have gone back to work, trading stories about toxic friendships and how hard it was to recognize manipulation when it came from someone you trusted. Walking back to the office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. 3 months after the wedding, my work phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered and heard a man introduce himself as Hugo Lawson, our wedding photographer. He apologized for taking so long with the final photos, but said he'd been personally editing each one to make sure they were perfect. He asked if he could drop them off at my house that evening since he lived nearby. I gave him our address and spent the rest of the afternoon excited to finally see the professional photos. James got home from work right before Hugo arrived. Hugo showed up at 7 with a beautiful leather album and a USB drive containing all the digital files. He set everything on our coffee table and asked if he could mention something that happened at the wedding. My stomach dropped, worried something had gone wrong that we didn't know about. Hugo explained that during cocktail hour, he'd been setting up his equipment near the entrance when he noticed a woman trying to slip inside through a side door. She was dressed casually, not like a wedding guest, and was looking around nervously. He'd approached her to ask if she needed help, and she'd claimed she was a friend of the bride who'd forgotten something in her car earlier. But Hugo had photographed our entire guest list during the ceremony and reception, and he recognized her from the bachelorette party footage I'd shown the venue coordinator as someone specifically banned from the wedding. He'd immediately alerted venue security, and they'd escorted her away from the property. She'd argued and insisted she had a right to be there, but security made her leave and watched to make sure she didn't come back. I sat down hard on the couch, my hands shaking. Rachel had actually tried to crash my wedding. After everything, after being publicly exposed and uninvited, she'd still tried to sneak in. James asked Hugo if Rachel had caused any problems or if any guests had seen her. Hugo assured us she never made it past the entrance area and no guests were aware of the situation. He'd made sure of that because he didn't want anything to distract from our special day. I thanked him, my voice cracking, and told him he'd protected us from something that could have ruined the entire reception. Hugo smiled and said he'd seen a lot of wedding drama in his career, but he'd never seen someone try that hard to sabotage a couple's happiness. He opened the leather album and started showing us the photos. They were stunning. Every single shot captured genuine moments of joy and love. There was one of James and me during our first dance, both of us laughing at something he'd whispered in my ear. Another of my sister giving her toast, her face full of emotion. Several beautiful portraits of us during golden hour, the light making everything look warm and magical. My short hair was styled perfectly in every photo, swept to the side with small flowers tucked behind my ear. I'd been so worried about how the photos would look with hair I hadn't chosen, but seeing them now, I looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Rachel had tried to take that away, and failed. Hugo left an hour later after we'd gone through every photo twice. James and I sat on the couch with the album between us, just looking at the images of the best day of our lives. The next morning, I started creating a private photo album online. I uploaded 50 of my favorite photos and set the privacy settings so only specific people could view it. I sent the link to my parents, James's parents, my sister, and the friends who'd stood by us through everything with Rachel. Within hours, the comments started coming in. My mom wrote about how beautiful the ceremony was, and how proud she was of how I'd handled everything. James's dad commented on a photo of us cutting the cake, saying he'd never seen his son so happy. My sister left comments on almost every photo, talking about specific moments she remembered from the day. Sabina wrote that my hair looked amazing, and she was sorry she'd ever doubted that the day would be perfect, despite the sabotage. Looking through the photos again while reading everyone's comments, something shifted in my head. Rachel had taken away the long romantic updo I'd wanted for 3 years. She'd stolen that choice from me and tried to ruin my appearance for the most important day of my life. But she couldn't take away my happiness. She couldn't take away the love between James and me, or the support of real friends and family, or the beautiful memories we'd made despite her best efforts. The photos proved it. Every single image showed two people completely in love, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them. That was what mattered. Not the hair, not the drama, not Rachel's jealousy. I closed my laptop and went to find James in the kitchen. I told him I wanted to plan something fun for us, just the two of us, to celebrate surviving everything and coming out stronger. The following Friday, James told me to pack a bag for the weekend, but wouldn't say where we were going. He drove us 2 hours north to a spa resort tucked into the mountains. The place was gorgeous, all stone and wood with huge windows overlooking forests and a lake. We checked into our room and James handed me a folder with a schedule. He'd booked us massages, a couple's yoga class, fancy dinners, and on Saturday morning, a hair consultation with a stylist who worked at the resort's salon. The stylist specialized in growing out shortcuts and helping people transition back to long hair. I looked up at James with tears in my eyes. He said he knew I'd made peace with the short hair, but he also knew I still wanted it long again eventually, and he wanted to help make that happen in the healthiest way possible. Saturday morning, I met with the stylist, a woman in her 40s with beautiful long hair that she said she'd grown from a pixie cut over 3 years. She examined my hair, asked about my hair type and growth patterns, and created a detailed plan. She explained that with regular trims every 6 weeks to keep the shape nice. While it grew, deep conditioning treatments every month and specific products to promote healthy growth, I could have shoulder-length hair in about a year and long hair again in 2 years. She wrote everything down, recommended products, and even styled my current shortcut in a way that would make the growing out process easier. She took before photos and said I could check in with her virtually every few months to adjust the plan as needed. Walking out of that salon, I felt like I'd taken back some control that Rachel had stolen. I couldn't speed up time or undo what happened, but I could make a plan and work toward getting back what I wanted. That afternoon, James and I sat in the resort's hot tub watching the sunset. He asked how I was really doing with everything, not just the hair, but the whole Rachel situation. I thought about it while the warm water bubbled around us. I told him that losing Rachel hurt less than I expected because I was realizing our friendship had been slowly poisoning me for years without me knowing it. Every time something good happened, Rachel had found a way to make me doubt it or feel guilty about it or worry that I didn't deserve it. I'd thought that was just her being protective or concerned. But really, she'd been tearing me down so gradually I didn't notice until she did something so obvious I couldn't ignore it anymore. James said he'd noticed how much more confident I seemed lately, how I made decisions faster and second-guessed myself less. He admitted he'd always thought Rachel was a little controlling, but figured it wasn't his place to say anything since she was my best friend. Now he wished he'd said something sooner. I told him I probably wouldn't have listened, that I had to see it for myself. We talked about how the whole situation had actually made us stronger as a couple, because we'd faced a real crisis together and come out united. James said he was more aware now of toxic people and red flags in friendships. He was grateful I'd had the courage to expose Rachel publicly, instead of just quietly cutting her off, because it forced everyone to see the truth instead of letting Rachel control the story. The sun disappeared behind the mountains, and we stayed in the hot tub talking until our fingers were wrinkled and the stars came out. We got home Sunday evening, and I found a stack of mail on our doorstep. Most of it was junk, but one envelope caught my eye. Plain white, addressed to me at my workplace address, but delivered to our home. I opened it and found another letter from Rachel. This one was different from the first. No apologies, no excuses. Just anger. She wrote that I'd destroyed her reputation and made it impossible for her to keep any friendships in our social circle. People who'd known her for years were treating her like a monster because of what I did. She'd lost friends, been uninvited from events, had people talking about her behind her back. She said I'd taken one mistake and turned it into a weapon to ruin her entire life. The letter went on for 3 pages, getting angrier with each paragraph. She called me vindictive and cruel. She said I was punishing her way beyond what the situation deserved. She claimed that if I'd really been her friend, I would have talked to her privately, instead of humiliating her in front of everyone. The last line said she hoped I was happy with myself for destroying someone who'd loved me like a sister for 12 years. I read the letter twice, my hands shaking, and then showed it to James. He read it and immediately said we needed to do something because Rachel was clearly not accepting that our friendship was over. I called my lawyer friend on Monday morning during my lunch break. I met her at her office that evening and showed her both letters Rachel had sent. My lawyer friend read them carefully and said the pattern was concerning. The first letter tried manipulation and guilt. The second letter showed escalating anger and blame. Rachel was building a story in her head where she was the victim and I was the villain, and that kind of thinking sometimes led to more serious harassment or even threats. She asked if Rachel had tried to contact me any other way. I told her about Rachel trying to crash the wedding, showing up at Cooper's house asking for my address and the various attempts to reach out through mutual friends. My lawyer friend pulled out her laptop and started drafting a cease and desist letter. She explained that this was a formal legal document demanding that Rachel stop all contact with me, my family, my friends, and my workplace. It would be sent via certified mail so we'd have proof Rachel received it. If Rachel continued to contact me after receiving the letter, we could potentially pursue a restraining order or file harassment charges. The letter was firm and clear. It stated the facts of Rachel's sabotage, listed every attempt she'd made to contact me since being cut off, and explicitly demanded that all contact stop immediately. My lawyer friend said she'd have it sent out the next day. The cease and desist letter was sent Tuesday morning via certified mail. I tracked it online obsessively. Rachel signed for it on Friday afternoon. I felt a weird mix of relief and anxiety. Relief that we'd taken official legal action to protect ourselves. Anxiety about how Rachel would react to being threatened with legal consequences. The first week after she received the letter, nothing happened. No calls, no letters, no attempts to contact me through friends. I started to relax slightly. Maybe the legal language had finally gotten through to her. Maybe she'd realized she couldn't keep trying to force herself back into my life. The second week was the same. Blissful silence. I went to work, had lunch with Clementine, came home to James, and didn't think about Rachel for hours at a time. I started to hope that maybe this was finally over. Maybe she'd accepted that our friendship was done and moved on with her life. I should have known better. 2 weeks and 3 days after Rachel signed for the cease and desist letter, my phone rang while I was at work. Sabina's name flashed on the screen. I answered, and she asked if I was sitting down. My stomach dropped. She said she'd been at a coffee shop that morning and overheard 2 women talking about the bachelorette party incident. They were saying they'd heard I'd physically attacked Rachel, that I'd shoved her and screamed in her face, that security had to pull me off her. Sabina had interrupted their conversation to say she'd been there, and that wasn't what happened at all. The women had looked embarrassed and quickly left. But Sabina was worried because if Rachel was spreading that version of events, other people might be hearing it too. People who weren't at the party and had no way to know the truth. I thanked Sabina for telling me and for setting the record straight. After we hung up, I sat at my desk feeling sick. Rachel was rewriting history, making herself the victim of my violence instead of the perpetrator of deliberate sabotage. It was exactly what my lawyer friend had warned might happen. People who wanted to believe Rachel, or who didn't know the full story, might accept her version of events. I needed to get ahead of this before the lies spread too far. I pulled up my phone and started texting everyone who'd been at the bachelorette party. I kept the message simple and direct, explaining that I'd heard Rachel was spreading a different version of events, and asking if they'd be willing to correct the story if they heard it. The responses came back fast. Most people replied within minutes saying they'd absolutely set the record straight. 3 women offered to write down exactly what they saw that night, and sign their statements in case I needed proof later. I saved every single response in a folder on my phone, building a file of evidence that showed what really happened. By the time I left work that afternoon, I had 12 confirmations from people willing to back me up, and 3 written statements sitting in my email inbox. I forwarded everything to my lawyer friend with a note explaining the situation. She replied saying this was smart documentation, and to keep her updated if Rachel's lies escalated. That evening at home, my sister stopped by with takeout and found me staring at my laptop screen. I told her about Rachel's new story, about the written statements. about feeling like I was building a case against someone who used to be my best friend. She sat down next to me and suggested I write my own account of everything while the details were still clear in my mind. Not for anyone else to read necessarily, just for myself to have a complete record of what actually happened from start to finish. I opened a new document and started typing. The hair salon appointment, the security footage, the bachelorette party confrontation, the best man's revelation at the wedding, Rachel's letters and attempts to contact me. I wrote for 3 hours straight, including every specific detail I could remember, every exact quote, every moment that proved Rachel's pattern of sabotage. My sister ordered more food and made tea while I typed, not interrupting, just being there. When I finally finished, the document was 11 pages long and I felt lighter somehow. Seeing it all laid out in order made the pattern impossible to deny. Rachel hadn't just made one mistake or had one moment of jealousy. She deliberately hurt me over and over, then played victim when I finally exposed her. I saved the document in 3 different places and sent a copy to my sister's email for safekeeping. She hugged me before she left and told me she was proud of how I was handling this, that most people would have just tried to move on and pretend it never happened. 4 months passed and life started feeling normal again. I went to work, had dinner with James, met Clementine for lunch on Thursdays, and slowly stopped checking my phone every hour to see if Rachel had found a new way to contact me. Then one Saturday morning, I stopped at a coffee shop near my apartment and saw a woman I recognized from Rachel's social media photos. She was sitting alone at a corner table and kept glancing at me like she was trying to decide something. Finally, she stood up and walked over, introducing herself as one of Rachel's close friends. She asked if she could talk to me for a minute, and I said sure, curious what this was about. She sat down across from me and admitted she'd been hearing some concerning things lately about how Rachel treated people, and she was starting to wonder if Rachel had been honest about why our friendship ended. I stayed quiet and let her talk. She said Rachel told everyone I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I'd cut my own hair in a panic and then blamed Rachel to avoid taking responsibility for my own actions. I pulled out my phone without saying anything negative about Rachel and asked if she wanted to see what actually happened. She nodded, so I opened the security footage the salon manager had sent me and turned my phone around. We both watched in silence as Rachel handed cash to the stylist. As the stylist nodded and started cutting while I had my eyes closed at the wash station, as Rachel checked to make sure I wasn't watching. The woman's face went pale. She watched the video twice and then looked up at me with this horrified expression. She apologized for believing Rachel's version without questioning it, for not reaching out sooner to hear my side. Then she told me something that made my stomach hurt. Rachel had been getting worse over the past few months, increasingly angry and paranoid, lashing out at anyone who suggested she might have been wrong about anything. The woman said she was seriously thinking about ending her own friendship with Rachel because the constant drama and negativity had become too much to handle. She thanked me for showing her the truth and left the coffee shop looking shaken. I sat there for a while after she left, feeling this weird mix of emotions. Part of me felt good knowing that even Rachel's closest friends were starting to see through her lies and manipulation. But another part of me felt sad that it took something this big and public for people to notice patterns that were probably there all along. How many other people had Rachel hurt over the years? How many times had she played the victim while secretly being the one causing harm? I thought about Sabina and her engagement rumors, about the best man and Rachel's attempt to stop my wedding, about all the small moments over 12 years that I'd brushed off as Rachel just being protective or concerned. The pattern had always been there, but I'd been too close to see it clearly. I finished my coffee and walked home, and for the first time I didn't feel angry at myself for missing the signs. Some people are just really good at hiding who they really are. A week later, James and I hosted a small dinner party at our apartment. We invited 8 people, the friends who'd supported us through everything and never wavered in their loyalty. Sabina came with her husband. Clementine brought wine. My sister made her famous pasta dish. We didn't talk about Rachel at all for the first hour, just ate and laughed and celebrated the fact that James and I were finally married without all the tension and drama that had marked our actual wedding reception. It felt good to be surrounded by people we could trust completely, people who'd proven they genuinely wanted good things for us. Halfway through dinner, someone mentioned they'd heard through mutual friends that Rachel had started therapy. The table went quiet for a second, and everyone looked at me to see how I'd react. I thought about it for a moment and admitted I had complicated feelings about that news. Part of me hoped Rachel would actually work on herself and figure out why she felt the need to sabotage people she claimed to care about. Part of me was skeptical that she'd take real responsibility instead of just finding new ways to play victim. But mostly I just felt relieved that she was focusing her energy on something other than me and my life. The conversation moved on to other topics, and I realized I'd gone through that whole exchange without feeling the sharp anger that used to come up every time Rachel's name was mentioned. 5 months after the wedding, I was getting ready for work one morning when I suddenly realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about Rachel or the betrayal even once. A whole week where my brain had been occupied with normal things like work projects and dinner plans, and a funny movie James and I watched. My life had genuinely moved forward. I was doing great at my job and had just gotten positive feedback from my boss on a big project. My marriage was strong, and James and I had fallen into comfortable routines that made our apartment feel like home. I'd made new friends through work and through Clementine, people who liked me for who I was now instead of who I'd been in college. Even my hair had grown out into this cute shoulder-length style that I actually preferred to the long hair I'd been growing before. I looked different in the mirror now, but I liked what I saw. That same week, Clementine invited me to join her book club. She said it was a group of 6 women who met twice a month to discuss books, but mostly just drank wine and talked about their lives. I hesitated at first because the idea of walking into a room full of strangers and trying to make friends felt scary after everything with Rachel. But Clementine promised they were good people, and that I'd fit right in. The first book club meeting was at someone's house across town. I walked in nervous and left 3 hours later with 4 new phone numbers and plans to get coffee with 2 of the women that weekend. They knew nothing about my history with Rachel, nothing about the hair sabotage or the bachelorette party confrontation, or any of the drama that had defined my life for months. To them, I was just a normal person who liked the same books they did, and had funny stories about my husband. It was so refreshing to have friendships that weren't colored by trauma, or defined by what I'd survived. These women liked me for me, not because they felt sorry for me, or because they'd witnessed some dramatic confrontation. Just regular friendship based on regular things like shared interests and good conversations. A few weeks later, my sister called while I was making dinner. She'd just seen Rachel at some Italian place downtown with a group of women I didn't recognize. My sister said Rachel spotted her across the restaurant and immediately looked down at her plate, pretending she hadn't seen her. The whole table Rachel was sitting at looked tense and awkward, not like friends having fun. My sister told me Rachel looked different somehow. Tired, maybe, or just unhappy. She said she didn't want to sound mean, but it seemed like Rachel was dealing with the natural results of her own actions, losing friends and respect in our social circle. I thanked my sister for letting me know and went back to chopping vegetables for dinner. The weird thing was, I didn't feel that sharp anger anymore when I heard Rachel's name. Somewhere over the past few months, the fury had faded into something quieter. Just sadness, really. Sad about all those years I spent thinking we had a real friendship when Rachel was actually threatened by me the whole time. Sad that I missed so many red flags because I wanted to believe she cared about me. The whole situation taught me to pay attention to how people actually treat me instead of just listening to what they say. It taught me that real friends show up consistently, not just when it's convenient or when they can get something from it. I thought about Clementine and the women from book club, how easy and natural those friendships felt compared to the constant subtle stress I'd felt around Rachel without even realizing it. 3 weeks after that, James came home from work grinning like crazy. His boss had called him into the office that afternoon and offered him a senior position with a significant raise. We decided to celebrate with dinner at this fancy steakhouse we'd been wanting to try. I wore a blue dress James loved, and he put on the suit from our wedding. The restaurant was perfect, dim lighting and soft music, and we spent 2 hours eating amazing food and talking about what the promotion meant for us. James ordered champagne, and we toasted to his success and to our future. Walking back to the car afterward, I felt genuinely happy. The kind of happy that isn't clouded by worry or drama. We were crossing the parking lot toward our car when someone stepped out from between 2 vehicles right in front of us. Rachel. She looked just as shocked to see us as we were to see her. This was the first time I'd been face-to-face with her since the bachelorette party 6 months ago. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something. Maybe an apology or an excuse or another manipulation attempt. I didn't give her the chance. I looked right at her and said the only thing that mattered. I have nothing to say to you. Then I walked past her toward our car. James put his arm around my shoulders and matched my pace, creating a barrier between me and Rachel without making it dramatic. I could feel Rachel standing there behind us, probably trying to figure out what to do next. But I didn't look back. James unlocked the car and I got in and we drove away, while Rachel stood alone in the parking lot. The whole drive home I felt proud of myself for not engaging, for not giving her the confrontation she probably wanted, so she could twist it into some story about how I was the problem. That night around 11, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew immediately it was Rachel because she'd already burned through 3 numbers I'd blocked. The message said she'd seen me at the restaurant and needed to apologize in person, that she'd been in therapy working on herself, and understood now how much she'd hurt me. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a screenshot of the text message, opened my email, and forwarded it to my lawyer friend with a note explaining this was the 4th attempt at contact, despite the cease and desist letter. Then I blocked the new number and added it to the list I was keeping of all Rachel's attempts to reach me. James watched me handle it and said he was impressed by how calm I stayed, how I'd learned to document everything without getting emotionally pulled back into Rachel's drama. My lawyer friend responded the next morning saying she'd send an updated cease and desist letter that afternoon. The new letter arrived at Rachel's address 2 days later, this time with stronger language about harassment and potential legal consequences if the contact continued. My lawyer friend sent me a copy and pointed out the section where she'd outlined every attempt Rachel had made to contact me in the past month, showing a clear pattern of ignoring the previous warning. After that letter was delivered, the silence that followed felt different from before. More final somehow. Like maybe Rachel had actually understood this time that I was serious about cutting her completely out of my life. Weeks went by with no texts, no calls, no attempts to reach me through mutual friends. The quiet felt like relief. 6 months after the wedding, James surprised me with a nice dinner at home to celebrate our half anniversary. He'd ordered food from our favorite Thai place and set up candles on our dining table. After we ate, he pulled out his laptop and suggested we look through our wedding photos together, something we hadn't done since right after the honeymoon. I'd been avoiding the photos, honestly, worried they'd just remind me of Rachel's betrayal and everything she'd tried to ruin. But sitting there with James scrolling through hundreds of pictures, I felt something unexpected. The photos were beautiful. Really beautiful. The photographer had captured so many genuine moments of joy and love, me and James laughing during our vows, our families hugging us after the ceremony, our first dance with everyone watching and smiling. And my hair, the short pixie cut I'd cried over for days, actually looked elegant in the professional photos. Sophisticated and modern in a way that suited the simple dress I'd chosen. Looking at those pictures, I realized Rachel had failed completely. She'd tried to sabotage my wedding day, and instead I'd ended up with photos that showed real happiness, real love, real celebration with people who actually cared about me. A few weeks later, I signed up to volunteer with a women's mentorship program at my company. The program matched experienced employees with younger women who were just starting their careers, helping them handle workplace relationships and professional development. During my first mentorship meeting with a 23-year-old analyst named Maya, she opened up about a coworker who claimed to be her friend, but constantly undermined her in meetings and took credit for her ideas. I didn't mention Rachel by name, but I shared what I'd learned about recognizing manipulation patterns, about the difference between someone who claims to support you and someone who actually does. Maya's whole face changed as I talked, like pieces were clicking into place for her. She said she'd been making excuses for this coworker's behavior for months, but hearing me describe toxic friendship patterns made her realize she needed to set boundaries. Over the next few months, I met with Maya regularly and watched her grow more confident, more willing to stand up for herself. Helping her felt good, like something positive had come from my experience with Rachel, even though Rachel never intended to teach me anything valuable. One afternoon, Clementine and I were having coffee in the break room when she said something that caught me off guard. She told me she'd noticed how much more confident and sure of myself I'd become over the months she'd known me. She said when we first met, I seemed nice but a little uncertain, like I was always second-guessing myself. But now I spoke up more in meetings, shared my opinions without apologizing first, and generally seemed more comfortable in my own skin. I sat there thinking about what she'd said, and realized she was right. Ending the friendship with Rachel had removed this constant low-level stress I hadn't even recognized I was carrying. All those years, Rachel had been subtly undermining me, making little comments that seemed like concern, but were actually designed to make me doubt myself. Without that constant negative voice in my life, I'd started trusting my own judgment more, stopped seeking validation from people who didn't really have my best interests at heart. Clementine had only ever known me without Rachel's influence, and she liked what she saw, which meant the real me was actually pretty okay. My hair had grown several inches by then, and was sitting right at my shoulders in this flattering length that framed my face nicely. I actually loved it more than the long hair I'd been growing before, though I'd never admit that to Rachel. One Saturday morning, I took a selfie in good natural light, my hair looking shiny and healthy, and posted it on social media with a caption about growth and new beginnings. Within an hour, the post had dozens of comments from real friends, people saying I looked happy and confident, people celebrating the positive changes in my life. My sister commented with heart emojis. Clementine wrote that I was glowing. James's mom said I looked beautiful and strong. Even Sabina, who'd shared her own experience with Rachel's manipulation months ago, commented that she was proud of me for moving forward so gracefully. Reading through all those supportive messages, I felt genuinely grateful for the people in my life now, the ones who showed up for me consistently and wanted good things for me without any hidden agenda or secret jealousy. A few weeks later, James and I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open, browsing vacation packages. I suggested returning to Hawaii for our first anniversary, the same resort where we spent our honeymoon. He looked at me and smiled, understanding immediately what I meant. We wanted to go back to that place where we first started processing everything with Rachel, but this time create purely happy memories without any shadow of betrayal hanging over us. James clicked through the booking page and reserved the exact same room we stayed in before, ocean view with the balcony where we'd watched sunsets. The confirmation email arrived within minutes, and I felt this quiet excitement building, knowing we were taking back something that Rachel had tried to taint. 2 days after we booked the trip, my phone buzzed with a message from Sabina. She said Rachel had moved to a different city for a fresh start, packed up and left without telling most people where she was going. I read the message twice and waited for some strong emotion to hit me, but mostly I just felt nothing. The physical distance between us didn't matter much because Rachel had already become insignificant in my emotional world. I typed back a brief thank you to Sabina for letting me know, then put my phone down and went back to planning our anniversary trip. The following weekend, my extended family gathered at my parents' house for my cousin's birthday party. I was helping set up the dessert table when my sister pulled me into the hallway, away from everyone else. She told me she was proud of how I handled everything with Rachel, from exposing the truth to setting firm boundaries to moving forward without looking back. Then she said something that surprised me. Watching me stand up for myself had inspired her to end a toxic friendship of her own, someone who'd been subtly putting her down for years. We hugged in that hallway, and I felt grateful that something good had come from my painful experience, that maybe other people could learn from what I went through. That evening, James and I curled up on our couch with takeout containers and a movie playing quietly in the background. I leaned against his shoulder and found myself thinking about how the worst betrayal of my life had somehow led to the best personal growth I'd ever experienced. My marriage felt stronger because we'd faced a crisis together and came out united. My friendships were healthier because I now recognized manipulation patterns and refused to tolerate them. My boundaries were clearer, and I enforced them without guilt or apology. Most importantly, I had genuine confidence in myself that didn't depend on anyone else's validation or approval. Rachel had tried so hard to sabotage my happiness, spent years undermining me in ways I didn't even recognize, but in the end she accidentally taught me the most valuable lesson of all. She showed me exactly how to protect and value my own happiness instead of letting toxic people chip away at it piece by piece.